Right, so the absolute first thing, I think it's probably one of the things that Bert and SUNOVA got a little bit of recognition for, and that is basically the parabolic rail, right? And so initially when I first came up with the idea, I just called them rail stringers or wooden rail stringers back in the day. I mean, not a very catchy name. And then I think it might have been early 2000s, I met a guy called Greg Law, and he used the phrase parabolic rail, and since then it just stuck. But the reality is it's probably not the right description, but it sounds cool. So anyway, what it is basically we've taken the stringer, right? So normally in a normal surfboard you have a piece of foam, right, whole board, and then you'll have a bit of wood that runs down the middle. Okay, but in a SUNOVA, the foam is bare, there's no stringer in the middle, and the stringer is basically running around the outline of the board, all right? So what happens is, if you ride a board that does not have a stringer, let's say it's an old PU, you get an old PU longboard from maybe back in the 50s, early 60s, before they were using stringers, and it's very floppy, right? You paddle the board, it's got this ugly reverb, you surf it and you can feel this soft flex going through the board, right? So what a stringer does in a normal board is it helps the board return back to shape quickly. So once the board's been flexed, the stringer helps it spring back quicker, because without the wood, the spring back is a bit slow and sloppy and floppy, and just the board's not positive, right? So that's what the stringer does in a conventional board. But if you think about it, right, what happens is the stringer will be the stiffest part of the board, and the rails, they're just foam and fiberglass, so they can actually flex slightly different to the center line of a board. Right, but we've established that the wood running down the middle of a board, it's the magic bit that you kind of need to make the board feel positive and to spring back into shape quickly. Right, so our boards, most of the spring back comes from the rail line, right? So if you can imagine, you're on a normal board with a stringer, you got it on rail, half the board's in the water, right? Foam and fiberglass. Your stringer is in the middle of the board, but that's up out of the water. Now, as the board flexes, the stringer wants to spring back, right? But it's out of the water. Whereas in our case, the spring back is coming from the rail line, okay? And that's down deep in the water. So you really get a feeling of when the board flexes, as it unloads, you get so much more spring, because on a normal surfboard, you're only just relying on foam and fiberglass in the rail, but that's where you actually want the spring back. So what we've done is the spring back that normally comes from the middle of the board, we put in the rails, gives it a totally unique feeling. A lot of people would use the word slingshot or catapult, drive, projection. So what ends up happening is, as you put it through a turn, you can just feel the thing wants to keep its speed, and if you flex it up a bit more, it just wants to spring you out. So that's the parabolic rail and the stringer that runs the rail line, and that's the feeling that it will give you.